Today we're going to be working with solving rational equations. So it says we're going to solve the rational equations by a method of choice. We're going to find the code word that represents the answer and write the code in the corresponding blanks. So what I'm going to do for you guys, I'm actually going to work a few of these problems. So if you want to go ahead and circle that, I'm going to work problem number 1. I'm going to work problem number 2, number 7, and number 14. So those are the 4 problems I'm going to work. So let's start with question number 1. Okay, so we have x over 60 minus 5/6 equals 3/5. So in order for us to solve this problem, what we're going to do is multiply by the greatest common factor. So the biggest number that we have is 60. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply all 3 fractions by 60. Now, by multiplying all 3 fractions by 60, because remember, whatever I do to one fraction, I have to do to them all, it's going to eliminate my denominators. So what I'm going to end up with is x minus, and 60 divided by 6 is 10, and 10 times 5 is going to give me 50. And then 60 divided by 5 gives me 12, and 12 times 3 gives me 36. So by multiplying those out, I end up with just a simple equation. So in order to get x by itself, I'm going to add 50 to both sides. And so what I end up with is x equals 86. Okay, so what you're going to do is find 86 on the right-hand column and write the word under number 1. Okay, so let's look at problem number 2. Problem 2, I have 1 over x plus 3/8 equals 1/4. So 8 is going to be my greatest common factor. So I'm going to multiply all 3 fractions by 8, again, to eliminate as many denominators as I can. So what happens in my first fraction actually has to stay 8 over x. And what's going to happen in my second fraction, those 8's cancel, so I'm just left with plus 3 is equal to 8 divided by 4 is going to be 2. So again, we're solving to get x by itself. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. I get 8 over x is equal to a negative 1. And then here, if I multiply both sides by x, these x's cancel, and I get 8 equals negative x. And I'm going to divide by a negative 1 because I can't have an answer of a negative x. So my answer here is going to be x equals negative 8. So again, on the right-hand column, find where x is negative 8 and write the word under number 2. Okay, so let's look at number 7. In problem number 7, I have x plus 3 over x minus 2 equals 4/3. So this type of problem should look familiar to you. This should look like a proportion. So we're actually going to solve it just as if it was an actual proportion. So here, whenever I solve a proportion, I'm going to cross multiply. So I'm going to multiply these two together, and I'm going to multiply these two together, and then I'm going to solve. So I have 3 parentheses x plus 3 is now going to be equal to 4 parentheses x minus 2. And now we're just going to solve. So I got to distribute the 3 and the 4. So I get 3x plus 9 is equal to 4x minus 8. And let's solve. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. And I get 9 equals x minus 8. And then I'm going to add 8 to both sides. So I end up with x equals 17. Okay, and let's look at the last problem, problem number 14. Okay, problem number 14 is going to be a little bit longer. Now, we're going to use the same rules that I taught you when we're adding and subtracting, because if you look at my first 2 expressions, I'm subtracting. So before I can add and subtract, what did I have to have? That's right, a common denominator. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and factor out these first 2 fractions. Well, the first fraction won't factor, but I can factor my second fraction into x minus 5 and x minus 2. And I can also factor the denominator on the other side of the equation by factoring out a 2. Okay, so again, we're looking at these first 2 fractions, and I need to find a common denominator. So I have an x minus 5 here and here, but I'm missing an x minus 2 on my first fraction. So remember, whatever I multiply by the bottom, I have to multiply by the top. Okay, so again, I'm going to leave my denominators the same, and I'm going to have x squared minus 2x, and all I did was distribute the x right there. Then I have minus 2, and then I'm going to keep my same denominator. Now what I told you guys in the beginning was if I had a subtraction sign, I'd change it to a plus, and I'm going to change the sign of my numerator. Okay, and again, all of that is still equal to x minus 1 over 2 parentheses x minus 5. Okay, now that we have a common denominator, I have x minus 2 and x minus 5 as my denominator. And my numerator, I'm just going to put it together. X squared minus 2x minus 2. Now I'm keeping my numerator as a quadratic because this quadratic does not factor. And I have that equal to x minus 1 over 2 parentheses x minus 5. Now what we have here is just like I did in question number 7. It's going to be a proportion. So I'm going to cross multiply and I'm going to solve. So watch what happens when I cross multiply. So when I cross multiply, I have 2 parentheses x minus 5, and then I have my quadratic x squared minus 2x minus 2. And that's going to be equal to my x minus 1 times x minus 2 times x minus 5. Now, same concept as before. If I have the same expression on the left-hand side of the equation as I do on the right-hand side of the equation, I can cancel them. So now what I have to do is FOIL, and I'm going to combine like terms and solve. So what I have left is 2, and I'm just going to distribute the 2 to all 3 terms of my quadratic. So I'm going to end up with 2x squared minus 4x minus 4 is all equal to, and here I'm going to FOIL, first, outer, inner, last. So I'm going to end up with x squared minus 2x and a minus 1x will give me negative 3x plus 2. So now I'm just going to solve. I subtract my x squared. I'm going to add 3x, and I'm going to subtract 2 all over here. So I minus my x squared. I'm going to add 3x, and I'm going to subtract 2. So here I end up with x squared minus x minus 6 is equal to 0. Remember, in order for us to factor, our quadratic has to be equal to 0. So then we're going to factor. I'm going to have an x minus 3 and an x plus 2. Now remember, those are my factors, but I'm asking you to find roots or the solutions. So what do I have to do with the negative 3 and the positive 2? That's right, I'm going to change signs. So x is going to be a positive 3 and a negative 2. Okay, so I want you to use those 4 examples to help you finish out the page.